it was Trump who signed that deal with the Taliban, and he sidelined the Afghan government. Now, he's in great danger of repeating that mistake in the case of Ukraine, where he ignores the government in Kyiv and just deals with the Russians in the same way he dealt directly with the Taliban. And I think we can all remember what happened there.
Now, the relationship between Russia and the US seems to be, well, warming, strengthening even under the new Trump administration. Overnight, Elon Musk appeared at the Conservative Political Action Conference in Washington, D.C., and repeated calls for elections in Ukraine. He says President Trump is right to ignore President Zelensky in peace talks with Moscow. This, of course, in the midst of escalation in tensions between the US and Ukraine over the last few days, with President Trump branding his counterpart a dictator, and President Zelensky stating Trump's living in a disinformation space created by Russia. So where are we at? Catherine Philp is the Times World Affairs editor and joins us this morning from Kyiv. Catherine, good morning.
Good morning, Callum.
Really good to speak to you. So then, these discussions between Zelensky and Keith Kellogg, who's Trump's envoy to Ukraine, they ended without a press conference. That was cancelled in the end. And that is sort of at the centre of this intensification of rhetoric, whether that be from Trump, whether that be from Musk, whether that be from his national security advisor, Mike Waltz, who says Ukraine needs to tone down its criticism of the US. In your assessment, Catherine, what is the state of the relationship between the US and Ukraine?
Well, firstly, I would counsel against putting so much store by what Elon Musk says. He's not part of this track. I think it is significant, however, that Donald Trump has chosen to surround himself with people who have shown sympathy for Russia in the past, and that is that doesn't help him break out of this misinformation bubble that Zelensky quite accurately described him as being in. He has already toned. I think what Zelensky said was actually very mild, and I don't think he really had much choice, certainly domestically, because what Trump had said was he wasn't just hurling insults. He was saying things that just simply weren't true. And it's very hard to let that stand when there are, glaring factual inaccuracies. So no, things are not great. Zelensky has taken a step back. I mean, this does seem a rather one way. Waltz telling Zelensky to tone it down when Trump has no intention of doing the same. But there is something concrete that the two sides are going to get back to, and which is a reopening of discussions over this minerals agreement. So maybe that can provide something more substantive for them to focus on.
Yeah. I suppose the fundamental problem that we're sort of considering in all of this for negotiators, for the deal, is how can a peace deal be structured in such a way that it doesn't simply provide Russia any sort of incentive to rearm, to regroup, and attempt to seize more of Ukraine in the coming years. Is it becoming any clearer how that can be achieved?
Well, firstly, you've got to believe that that's what both sides want, or the strongest of the people involved in this negotiation want, and that isn't clear. In order to negotiate a peace like that, it's got to be a good faith negotiation, and you've got to actually care about whether Russia comes in and takes Kyiv or not. And it's not clear so far that Donald Trump cares about that. Does he just care about getting signatures on a peace deal, walking away and claiming that he's solved the thing? I don't know if there are many people around Trump that speak truth to power, but the way that he treats people who even sort of mildly contest what he says or believes is disturbing, because it suggests that there's no one who's willing to tell him the truth because they're scared of him. I mean, especially within his own party and in Congress. I mean, people are actually scared that he would, that they're scared for their lives. I know that sounds utterly, over dramatic, but, look at January 6th, look at the fact that he's pardoned people, that he said that he who saves his country commits no crime. He's, this is a situation he's boxed himself himself into. So if I had a chance and there were no consequences for it, I would remind Trump of what he did in Afghanistan, even though he pushed blame onto that for Biden because Biden oversaw the botched withdrawal. It was Trump who signed that deal with the Taliban, and he sidelined the Afghan government. Now, he's in great danger of repeating that mistake in the case of Ukraine, where he ignores the government in Kyiv and just deals with the Russians in the same way he dealt directly with the Taliban. And I think we can all remember what happened there.
Yeah, that's a very good point. What of some of the other kind of diplomatic ins and outs of all of this? Shall we speak first of all about David Lammy, the UK Foreign Secretary, saying he is willing to listen to Russia. Here's a quote: "We are at a crucial juncture in this conflict, and Russia faces a test. If Putin is serious about a lasting peace, it means finding a way forward which respects Ukraine's sovereignty and the UN Charter, which provides credible security guarantees and which rejects Tsarist imperialism, and Britain is ready to listen. But we expect to hear more than the Russian gentleman's tired fabrications." The gentleman in question being Sergei Lavrov. That's the UK Foreign Secretary speaking.
I mean, I think that was a good statement. Again, like Lammy, I think I'm struggling for any evidence that Russia is interested in that kind of peace. I mean, yes, again, last night, the sleep of most Ukrainians was interrupted by air raid sirens. There were scores of drones across the country and ballistic missiles fired, as they are every single night. It's not really a backdrop that encourages faith in Putin's motives.
Yeah. And then the other part of all of this that I wanted to put to you was this reporting that the US is apparently opposing calling Russia the aggressor in a G7 statement that's being prepared for the third anniversary of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine by Russia. It's being framed as a threat to sort of derailing what has become a traditional show of unity, as is being reported. The US envoys have objected to the phrase Russian aggression and similar descriptions that have been used since 2022. It's just another part of this kind of what is the state of the relationship between the US and Russia in all of this.
Yeah, I mean, Washington's signaling that it's ready to consider what do they used to be called alternative facts in this. It does still, the draft agreement as statement as it exists does refer to the Russian invasion of Ukraine, rather than another formulation that Washington has been pushing, which is Ukraine conflict, as if it had just spontaneously erupted. So at least the invasion is still in there. But yeah, this attempt to sort of blame Ukraine for provoking an invasion of itself. It's part of this narrative that takes seriously Russia's rationale that that the war was because of NATO expansion and the prospect of Ukraine joining NATO. So again, I think it's just another sign of the American realignment under Trump. But again, on the NATO issue, Moscow would be good to be reminded that in fact the thing that's caused the most recent NATO expansion was its invasion of Ukraine, which brought Finland and Sweden into the alliance. So if Russia doesn't want to see NATO expand anymore, perhaps it should stop invading its neighbours.
Good advice, Catherine. Yes, such wisdom. Thank you very much indeed. It's good to speak to you, as always. Catherine Philp, the brilliant Times World Affairs editor, speaking to us from Kyiv, which, crucially, as Catherine reminds us there, has been experiencing more air raid alerts overnight. And yes, makes the clear point, stop invading people. Stop invading nations, Russia, and that would solve a lot of the problems that you are raising.
I was particularly struck when Catherine was talking there about what Keir Starmer needs to do in Washington next week with Donald Trump is remind Trump how he handled the withdrawal in Afghanistan. He blamed Biden for a lot of it, but it was Trump who signed it off. He sidelined the Afghan government. He spoke directly to the Taliban, and we all know how badly that ended, and basically remind Trump of that and say you don't want the same thing happening in Ukraine. A really interesting perspective on that.